Welcome to the Monkey Mind Podcast, your number one platform for athletes and mental health. Hosted by myself, Danny Perez. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Monkey Mind Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Danny Perez. I'm sorry, been a little MIA lately and haven't been posting as much recently. Kind of got away from the every Tuesdays and then the every other Tuesdays. Been moving around a bit, and life's been a little hectic on my end. So, I guess just to update everybody, I just recently got a coaching job out in Denver, Colorado. So driving out here and kind of setting everything up, getting an apartment was pretty hectic. I was literally in Kansas. Don't try this at home, but I was in Kansas with my knees on the wheel, sending in my security deposit because I was driving into Colorado that day and didn't have a place to live. So definitely like to do things last minute. It's kind of how I operate, but I'm trying to get better at that. But yeah, just wanted to update everybody on why I've been a little MIA and why the consistency hasn't been there. But yeah, that's enough about me. And today's guest, we have Sam Levins. So Sam is a certified mental performance coach, and she has a bachelor's degree in psychology from Wilfrid Laurier University in Canada, as well as a master's in sports and exercise psychology from the University of Kentucky. So she's also a former ice and roller hockey player and had the opportunity to represent Team Canada from 2013 to 2018 in roller hockey. She's been on the coaching side for a while now too. So she's very well versed on having multiple different perspectives in the sport, and now obviously having that mental performance certificate and that certification. She's now able to help athletes, and I think today's conversation was awesome, and she gives a lot of great insight on her personal experience and working with players now and kind of what she sees. And we kind of went down the rabbit hole here with a bunch of different topics, but it was a great episode, and I'm really excited to release this to you all. And again, thank you all for your patience and still sticking around. But we're going to try and get back into regular programming here and getting into a rhythm. So yeah, without further ado, before we get into this episode, we have a couple words from our sponsors. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Shift Group. Shift Group aims to help athletes navigate life after sports within the technology industry by providing support, education, and finally setting you up with the various companies they work with so you can hit the ground running. Shift Group is founded by athletes for athletes. They understand the feeling of having to hang up the skates or cleats and want to help athletes make a smooth transition into a competitive, goal-oriented industry that is fueled by the attributes all athletes possess. If you're interested in working with Shift Group to begin a career in tech, then head over to our website, monkeymindathletes.com/partners, and click Work with Shift Group. From there, it will take you to their inquiry page where you can input all your information. Make sure you type in Monkey Mind under the Where Did You Hear About Us section. Then under that, you click Submit, and someone from Shift Group will promptly reach out to you and get you rolling on your new career in tech. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Daily Dose CBD Inc. Daily Dose CBD Inc. creates full-spectrum CBD products ranging from tinctures, bombs, and dog treats. Research has shown that CBD has successful results in aiding in the following areas: anti-inflammation, anxiety, PTSD, help with breaking addiction, neuroprotection, epilepsy, arthritis, chronic pain, and sleeping disorders. Daily Dose makes an extremely safe and effective product that we know you will love, enjoy, and benefit from. Daily Dose has given Monkey Mind listeners 15% off all their orders. Head over to dailydosecbdinc.com and use promo code MonkeyMind15 for 15% off your purchases. That's promo code MonkeyMind15 for 15% off all your orders at dailydosecbdinc.com. All right, well, we have Sam Levins on today, who's a mental performance coach. Briefly about your academic background: a master's degree in exercise psychology from University of Kentucky, a bachelor's degree from Wilfrid Laurier University in Canada. You are a certified mental performance coach. You're a member of the Association for Applied Sports Psychology, Canadian Sports Psychology Association member, and a member of Solution Focused Brief Therapy certification. And then for your athletic background, you were a roller hockey player growing up for Team Canada from 2013 to 2018. Then you became a roller hockey coach with Team Canada Development Program from 2017 to 2019, and an ice hockey instructor from 2011 to 2019. And you've been an ice and roller hockey player for 20 plus years. So quite the academic and athletic background there.
Yeah, definitely lots going on there. I'd say it started with more the athletic side, obviously. And, as an athlete, I definitely had a horrible mental game, I think is the
Mhm.
best way I can put it. Um, I wasn't a flashy player, didn't have great hands, didn't have a great shot. It was more about the hard work and being funny, being a good teammate, big role player, I'd say. And
Mhm.
it as I got older, people would, I'd tell my friends I had a game and I'd get texts after that were like, "How many points did you get?" Like, this is not my thing. So
Yeah.
after a little while, it just turned into me thinking like, all right, so if I'm not getting points and like my team's not winning, clearly I'm not a great hockey player. So that was just the beginning of my mental game kind of falling apart, and
Mhm.
it took a while to get out of that. But I think that was kind of the beginning of the downfall of my ice career, honestly.
Mhm.
Um, so when I was maybe 17 or 18, I switched from ice to roller full time. And that was at the same time that I was starting my undergrad in psychology. So it was kind of the process of moving towards like a high pressure, kind of like the political world of ice hockey to the more fun, um, low pressure environment of roller hockey
Mhm.
while learning more about the brain and motivation and all that fun stuff. So I think the combination of switching the environment but still playing a game that I loved and grew up with while having the education piece was the beginning of things starting to piece together for me. And as I learned more about sports psychology, and I learned more about, hockey and the importance of role players, I started to appreciate the little things that I was good at. Like
Mhm.
I don't really lose faceoffs, and I really underestimated that growing up. Um, I blocked a lot of shots growing up, but I didn't think it was enough because I couldn't put the puck in the net. So as I got older, as I learned more, I started to appreciate the things that I did well.
Mhm.
And as that confidence came back, I just started playing better across the board. So I think that's when I started to really trust sports psychology, and that's when I saw it become applicable in my own life. And yeah, I think that's probably why I put so much of an emphasis on confidence with the athletes I work with now. But yeah, that's kind of how I got to where I am today.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I think that we have very similar stories, and I was never a point guy at all, more of a locker room guy. Um, but I've always been very nitpicky of myself physically as a player. You know what I mean? Which I feel like you can maybe resonate with that. But it's funny that you mentioned that as you study this more and as you've, you know, looked into it and really kind of given your whole life to the sports performance side of things, you now have this shift of perspective of, oh, well, I was really good at faceoffs, or I was really good at blocking shots. And there's those small things that actually make a big difference. But it's not so much that now, it's just how your mentality has shifted from seeing the negatives of you as a player and now seeing what you could bring positively, which will then, enhance your athletic performance. And I think that's something that a lot of players don't realize. It's making that shift of not seeing what you don't do, but seeing what you do, which I'm sure you can, preach on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great point. Um, my skill set didn't change. Like
Mhm.
obviously some things got better, and as you continue to work on things, you develop. It's just natural. But you know, growing up, I wasn't a goal scorer and I was good at blocking shots. And to this day, that's still my skill set. I still can't put the puck in the net
Mhm.
and I still block shots. I still win faceoffs. It was just the parts of my game that I appreciated and the parts that I wish I had. So it was like I went from wishing I was a certain kind of player and being really hard on myself that I wasn't that player. And every time I did something that didn't fit into the mold that I wanted to fit into, it was game over. I was spiraling. Like if I turn over in the first period, like instantly was like, well, I guess I just suck today. Like it's gonna be a rough one. Like there's no
Mhm.
way I can bounce back for the second and third, which is ridiculous. Like one mistake in the first and that's it for the game. Absolutely ridiculous. Or if I'm on for a goal against, my first thought is, well, I have to score to make up for it now. Like that's all my fault. I can't be a liability. But I wasn't a goal scorer. So I'd
Mhm.
get really frustrated that I was on for a goal against. So defensively I was lacking and offensively I was lacking. And it was horrible.
Mhm.
Like basically everything that I learned in school that athletes should not be doing, those are the things I was doing. Everything.
Yeah.
Just generally horrible mental game. But you know, as soon as you stop trying to wish that you were a certain kind of player and you stop trying to kind of fit into the mold and fit into the expectations that you're putting on yourself or others are putting onto you,
Mhm.
you can actually appreciate what you're doing and really start to grow because you know, like you said, when you focus on the things that you do well, it's a completely different mentality despite it being the same kind of skill set.
Exactly. I'm sure you've heard this before too, but I've said this and I've heard other players say this. Um, it's like you can tell if you're gonna have a good game of warmups if you have your legs under you. And it
Hmm.
just goes back to that one mistake. And you hear players say it too. Like once I start getting into that negative mindset, I'm mush. Like I can't play the rest of the game. And I think that's a very common theme for a lot of athletes. But like you said, it's just absolutely ridiculous that you're going to dictate a whole game off how you feel in warmups. And I'm not saying that everyone does this all the time, but I've heard it before and I've said it before, and I'm sure you can say the same. And just like going off what you said, I think it's absolutely ridiculous that you're going to go off one mistake or one part of the game to dictate the rest of the 2 periods that you have left. Um, and obviously, we'll talk about this more, but since we already are on it, what are some things that you would tell an athlete who maybe presents that to you, like, "Hey, once I make a mistake, I'm done. I can't play the rest of the game." What do you kind of say to them to help them get their mindset back on track and get them into that right frame of mind where they're going to get in a positive, positive mindset and channel that mistake or channel their brain into a way that they're going to be better off without it. You know what I mean? I guess just improve from there instead of going down from there.
Hmm. Um, there are a few different approaches depending on, the athlete. And I have some athletes who just they really need the blunt version, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's really hard to shift from a negative mindset to a positive one. So you kind of have to find the neutral mindset, so they're not
Okay.
like forcing positivity. Um, but I think the first thing I'd say is, all right, so if you score on your first shift and it's like the nicest goal of your career, and you play absolutely horrifically for the rest of the game, is that a good game? No, it's not, because everything except that one shift was bad. So on
Hmm.
the other side of it, if you make a mistake on your first shift, but then you just bounce back and play well for the rest of the game, like it's a good game.
Hmm.
So why are you getting shut down after one play if you know that play doesn't really impact the next couple periods, the rest of the game? Like with hockey specifically, your last shift does not directly impact your next one. Like you have other lines, there are other players who go on the ice. Like what you did on your last shift literally does not translate to your next one.
Hmm.
So much happens between your two shifts. Like there's absolutely no reason to pull mistakes with you. And there's no reason to get cocky either and think like, oh, I was so sick on that last shift. Like
Hmm.
I'm just getting overconfident now. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't matter. You have to reset. Like you back to the bench and it's just like a fresh start. You cannot rely on what you did on the last shift or get
Hmm.
stuck on what you did in the last shift. Like you just have to keep rolling. It's a long game. There are lots of opportunities. There are lots of there's lots of time for you to make mistakes. There's lots of time for you to do well, but you just have to kind of roll with it and find a way to reset and stay on track, because one shift does not dictate your entire game.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes you're off. Sometimes you have that warm up and like your legs aren't there, they feel heavy and your hands are feeling tight, and sometimes you're just off your game. And it happens. Like you might be right, you might make a mistake on your first shift and your second and your third, and it might be a bad game. That happens, that's fine. So if that actually is the case and that's the reality and not just you kind of assuming the worst, um, you got to figure out what else you can bring. If you're a goal scorer and you cannot find the back of the net, you better do your best to help someone else do that, because someone has to for you to win the game. So what else can you bring to the table? Is it
Hmm.
encouraging your teammates? Is it just trying to be a passer and setting up your line mates? Is it playing a defensively sound game? Is it leadership? Do you become the locker room guy? Are you encouraging everyone else on the bench? Are you talking to your coaches? Like, are you bringing other things to the table if your role is not going as well as you want it to? So there are lots of opportunities for you to kind of figure out if it's one bad shift, you can kind of bounce back for the rest of the game. And if it's a bad game, bring something else to the table, because
Hmm.
there's no way, like mentally and physically, there's nothing you can do. That's just not realistic.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's like having your A game and your B game, and you can only bring your A game. You want to try and strive for say 70, 75% of the time, but there's gonna be that time, that percentage where you're not on your A game. And what is it that you can bring in your B game that'll help you sleep at night and make you feel like you've contributed to the team or you actually did contribute to the team? Because going off what you said, I think a lot of players are like, if I don't bring this, I have nothing. But that makes you so one dimensional. And then you kind of are useless if you have that mentality. So I think it's important, you talking about that, and just I want to reiterate that being able to bring something else makes you so valuable, and also helps you with your performance, and having you be an asset to your team and to yourself, and just being more, instead of one dimensional, you have a lot of other things you can bring as well. That I think it's a huge thing that a lot of players should learn, at a earlier age. I didn't learn that till I was like 19, 20, and I was like, you gotta be able to bring more than just, I don't know. I was just like, we talked about physical and all that, but if you can bring something else, that's huge.
Yeah.
As far as presenting concerns with athletes today, what are some things that you notice, I guess, a trend with the athletes that you work with that a lot of them kind of bring to your attention? Like, hey, I'm struggling with this. What's like the main, I guess, one or two things?
Confidence, huge one. I think coaches like to say that players are soft, and I think I like to say that coaches should learn to adapt. Kids might be soft, it might just be a different mentality that we have in this generation. I don't know what it is, but I do know that, if all your players are soft, as you say, then you should probably learn to adjust to that and adapt to that, instead of continuing to rip them apart and tell them why they suck. Because players, if you have a team full of players who lack confidence, you're not going to win many games. You're not going to do too well. They're not going to come back the next season. Like, there's so much pressure that kids are facing these days, and whether you're in youth sports or kind of working up through juniors, the pros, college, whatever it is, like, social media is a nightmare. Like, you get on after any NHL game, any playoff game lately, and there's just guys with targets on their back and they're getting ripped apart. And like, a lot of these NHL players just don't go on social media during the playoffs because it's so toxic and people are so hard on them. And of course, that wears you down mentally and destroys your confidence. And these youth athletes don't really turn it off. And like, it's not that high pressure situation where they have millions of dollars on the line. It's, the sport that they love and they're supposed to enjoy. So when, teammates or opponents or their coaches or parents are putting so much pressure on them and telling them everything they're doing wrong, they're just so hard on themselves, and they're feeling that pressure externally and internally, and it's just wearing them down. And without that confidence, you're not going to make you're not going to take any risks. You're going to start making mistakes, but you're playing it safe, so you're having that like minimal impact kind of game, but also making mistakes. And like, you don't want that. Like, you're going to make mistakes either way, so you might as well take that risk and try to have an impactful kind of opportunity, even if you make a mistake. But coaches need to let these athletes make mistakes. They need to encourage them to take those risks and to be confident enough when they take that risk on a 50-50 puck, they don't hesitate for that split second and then lose the battle. They know that they can do it and they go. So I think confidence is a huge one. And, aside from the pressures that they're feeling from social media or coaches or whatever it is, I think a lot of athletes tend to tie their confidence to stats. Like I certainly did. And it sucks. It's so tough to, be generally confident when you're tying it to something external and something that's completely out of your control, or majorly out of your control. So, if your self-worth and the way you feel about yourself as a person is tied to your performance and your stats in your sport, that's so dangerous. Like, if your team is, if your line mates are playing like crap, you're going to have a harder time getting points. So your teammates not playing well means that your stats don't look as good. So you're going to go up to school the next day and be absolutely miserable, and you're not going to pay attention, or you're going to show up to work, or you're just going to be grumpy around your family. Like, tying the way you feel about yourself and the way you feel about life generally to the results that you get in your sport is really dangerous. And unfortunately, it's just extremely accessible. Like, everyone talks about stats, everyone asks about stats, everyone focuses on that, and that's obviously, stats are important. You got to put the puck in the net to win a game or two.
Sure.
But you have to figure out how to detach from that and have your confidence tied more so to the process and to the work ethic and to whether or not you're being a good teammate and respecting refs, even when it's really, really, really hard to do so. So
Mhm.
I think tying your confidence to just, who you are as a person and what you know deeply about yourself is really important to build that confidence, to be able to take those risks, to be able to develop as a player and grow and learn from those mistakes.
Mhm.
Um, I don't think you can really do that when your confidence is, well, when you're lacking confidence, firstly, and also when you're tying that confidence to results and to everyone else's opinions.
Yeah. No, I like that you talked about process. That's the biggest thing. And it sounds so cliche, just to trust the process, like slogan or whatever, but it really is the truest thing. And like you talked about, I think it's so dangerous just to go off results and statistics, especially now that we're approaching the off season. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, like players, they go on the ice and they're going to get mad when they do a rep wrong or they can't complete a rep correctly. It's like, hold up, like this is the place to mess up. This is the time to be bad at something and to learn how to be good at it. And this is the process. And as long as you know that you're giving your best effort and you have a good attitude about everything, you should be able to go to sleep at night and feel comfortable. Um, so I'm happy that you brought that up. And as far as kind of what you were just speaking about, it seems to me like you're big on balance of finding the balance with your social media use and then also finding the balance with your identity as well. And kind of, it's hard to navigate. And I think you'd agree too, but everyone says like, oh, be a hockey player, which is totally fine, but be a hockey player and have a certain attitude at the rink or at the gym. But then you have to be able to separate because, like you mentioned, it's no good when you're taking it into your family life or your home life. Um, so I think that's like the biggest thing that I hear from you because I struggle with that as well. I think a lot of athletes do is just putting their sole identity into a sport or whatever it is that they love to do.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things that an athlete really needs to understand from a young age and throughout their entire career is that your sport is something you do. It is not who you are. Your sport's going to come to an end. You will retire someday, whether you're 16 or 36 or 50 when you stop playing sports, it does not matter. At some point, sports are going to be done for you,
Mhm.
or at least, it's not going to be as competitive. It's just going to be like recreational with some of your friends or whatever. But you have to understand who you are as a person. That is the most important thing. Your sport is a part of what you do, it's a part of who you are. It shapes your character and your development and your friendships and your relationships. Yes, it does all those things, but you are so much more than your sport. Like, you are a member of your family, you're a member of your community, you're a member of your friend group. You, like for me, yeah, I play hockey. I've always played hockey, but I'm a nice person. I'm a kind person. I work really hard. I love my family, and like all those things are so much more important than hockey. Everything else, like the part of who I am and the things that I do and the things that I love and the reason I get out of bed in the morning, like all of that, so much more important than hockey. And I didn't know that at a young age. Everything I did was because I'm a hockey player. I would get angry during games and I'd try to be like this like tough guy. And it's like I thought that's what I was supposed to do as a hockey player, but I wasn't figuring out who I was because I was so focused on being the person I thought I was supposed to be as a hockey player. So yeah, that identity piece it's really difficult. And I think, with COVID, so many athletes were forced into figuring that out a lot sooner than they intended. A lot of college careers came to an end, high school careers came to an end because of COVID, and these people were just like, you're stuck. That career ends and you don't know what to do with your life. You don't know where to go next. And it's a huge loss. Like when I stopped playing ice hockey, it was tough. It took a few years to figure out who I wanted to be and the things I was good at when I wasn't at the rink. And it's hard to figure that out. Um, but it's incredibly important to know who you are outside your sport.
Mhm. Would you suggest athletes doing other things prior? We've had athletes come on here and talk about just kind of them making their transition. And they mentioned, when I was playing hockey, all I did was hockey. And all I thought about was hockey, which is totally fine. Because like once hockey was over, I was left with nothing. And I didn't know what else I liked. So would you suggest, and he suggested that athletes try and do other things. And would you suggest that that's, a good thing for athletes to do? I suggest that athletes play sports for as long, other sports for as long as they can until, a certain age, maybe 16, 17, you start to specialize. But How important do you think it is for athletes to find other things that they love to do outside of the rink? And I think it makes them more well-rounded. Would you agree?
Absolutely. 100%. I'm a firm believer that, well, I'm a firm believer because my parents forced it upon me as a kid, but
Okay.
the ice hockey season ends and I'm not allowed on the ice until about a week before tryouts and camps and stuff. No ice over the summer.
Mm,
I grew up with it, my brother grew up with it, and like we were just fine. Like he's playing pro hockey now, he played D1. Like clearly it didn't impact his game or mine that we were never on the ice during the summer. We played roller hockey, so it's kind of a loophole because it was still hockey, but we were on the ice, so we're still
yeah,
following the rule. And
exactly.
it's that helped. It was a different environment, a different group of friends. There's no kind of major pro end game and roller, so there was no pressure to be the best. There was never any crying after a game. There was never an angry car ride home with your parents. Like that's not what roller was. So that was our way to continue being active without feeling the pressure that the hockey season would put on us. And another thing that I think athletes don't really realize, I know a ton of hockey players who play video games. I mean, I have my little headset,
Yeah,
my
I saw
PlayStation over
that.
there. Like, I I didn't play a ton as a kid, but now it's something that it's just that's how I keep in touch with my friends now. Like we'll
Mhm.
just hop on, play some games, and like that's how I communicate with my friends, and it's really fun. I really enjoy it. I've also done some research to justify the amount of time that I spend playing video
Nice.
games
There you
because
go.
it's good for your attention. Like that's another thing. Parents and coaches are always like, you got to stop playing video games. It's really bad for you. And like, yes, obviously, if you sit there all night, you don't go to bed. Like, yeah, it's not great for you, but it is really good for communication. It actually is really good for your attention. It's good for spatial awareness. So, like, being able to track multiple different objects at once, any of those like action shooter
Mhm.
video games, really good for that. And for a hockey player, pretty important to be able to understand and track where your teammates and opponents are. So there are things that you can do outside of sport that benefit your sport without it feeling like you're training and overworking because like typically you start playing sports because you want to and you
Mhm.
continue because you love it and it's fun and maybe you're good at it, but as soon as it turns into like a chore and a job and
Mhm.
something that's exhausting and tiring, that's when it isn't fun and you start heading on that downhill spiral. So doing things outside of sport and finding that balance is so important, but it doesn't necessarily take away from your game. Like you're not missing out on training that other people are getting. You're getting it in a different way. Like you're
Mhm.
training your communication and your focus and your attention and being able to track those objects by playing Fortnite and Call of Duty and all that. And
Yeah.
you're working on your vision and your hands by playing roller hockey and hand-eye coordination if you're playing baseball all summer. Or you're just kind of stimulating your mind if you're just, sitting outside and reading and that's your hobby for the summer. Like it doesn't really matter what it is. Just take time away from the rink. And that also helps you stay motivated when you get back to it. You get a chance to miss it and to want it and to find that drive for it and that motivation. So that was a very long-winded way to answer your question.
No, but it's just
Yeah,
I
you,
appreciate it.
you
It's
need other
awesome.
stuff.
No, and that's why I think burnout is so real. There's so many players who burn out who are unreal hockey players or unreal athletes in general, no matter what sport it is. But you just get tired of it. So I think it's important that we reiterate, and definitely not long-winded. It was the perfect explanation, so thank you. But I think it drives home that point that diversify what you do. You still be all in on something, but still have other hobbies, and they do help. And I want to talk about the trends that you notice with some elite athletes, kind of the things that separate the best of the best from just the average player, and what a player can do or an athlete can do in whatever sport to help them become elite and get to that elite status. Because I think you can testify that there's a lot of players who are very good but don't have that extra oomph, I guess, for lack of a better
Mhm.
term, to make it. But I think that there's something within our mind, that a mindset that you have, or things that we do, that really catapult us to being elite, despite our physical traits that we have been given. And I was curious what you noticed from athletes that make them kind of separate them.
Mhm. I think there are a few different pieces of that. I think having an accurate perception of your own game is incredibly important. Too often we find ourselves as athletes being incredibly hard on ourselves, and sometimes that kind of skews our perception. And a game that might have been, not our best, but not bad, we just rip ourselves apart. And
Mhm.
we're really hard on ourselves when we don't have to be. And I think a lot of players in the pros, and as they get better and you start to um, really see the difference between the good, the great, and the McDavids.
Mhm.
I think having that understanding of what your game actually is and kind of pulling out the emotion and separating that from the facts and the evidence, like having that accurate understanding of your game is how you can figure out what's going well and what isn't very quickly and very accurately. And that's obviously really important when you have a really loaded schedule and you're really busy and it's like back to back to back nights. You have to be able to figure it out quickly. You don't really have a few days to kind of look back and watch video and determine if you really were having a bad game or if you were just kind of grumpy and it seemed like it was really bad. So having that accurate understanding is incredibly important. And I think being able to bounce back from mistakes and bounce back from not great shifts or a bad game, I think that is huge. Consistency is so underrated. I think everyone kind of underestimates the importance of it, but it, in my mind, is one of the most important things that a player can bring. So instead of having a player who has hot streaks and slumps, like yeah, those streaks might be unbelievable and they're absolutely deadly, but then those slumps, like they're completely invisible or
Mhm.
non-invisible, and they're just a liability out there. Um, and that makes it hard for coaches and it makes it hard for your teammates because your teammates don't know what to expect from you. Your coaches don't know the situations they can put you in because they don't know which version of you is showing up.
Mhm.
So developing that consistency with consistent preparation and working on your mindset so that you can bring the same intensity and the same effort and the same resilience to every game, whether you're playing the top team or the worst team, you're tired or like whatever's going on. Like if you can bring that same game and bring that consistency, you can trust yourself, your teammates can trust you, and your coaches can trust you. So I'll go back on my example. Like when I try to be a goal scorer, I'm a liability. I make really stupid plays. I try to force plays. I turn over pucks, and I don't trust myself. I'm sure my teammates don't, and I know my coaches don't. But I know with certainty that if we're up by a goal with 30 seconds to go and the faceoff's in our end, I know my coaches are probably putting me out there. I know my defenseman knows it's going to the corner, and I know it's going to the corner. I know I'm winning that faceoff. I trust it. My teammates do. My coaches do. Because every time I go out for a faceoff, I have that confidence. I've prepared for it. I'm bringing that intensity. I know I can handle a high pressure situation, and I don't care who I'm up against. I don't care the situation. I don't care about anything other than my ability to do it. Like it's just, I guess that's also part of the understanding that your game accurately, but
Mhm.
all the pieces kind of go together. But there's a lot that separate the good from the great. But I think to kind of sum that up, just try to remember everything I said. Accurate understanding of
Consistency.
your game, consistency,
Uh-huh.
and I think that's something else, and bouncing back from mistakes.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, obviously you're the expert in it, but I agree. Just from self-reflection, being like, yeah, I probably could have been more consistent. Yeah, I probably could have, not beaten myself up for mistakes, and probably would have been better off in a couple different areas. But no, I totally agree with you on everything. I think those are awesome points. And then kind of a two-part question here. Talk about your approach when you're working with athletes. So an athlete, comes to you and says, "Hey, I would like to utilize, your services, and I want to work with you, and I want to, help improve my mental game." Kind of what's your approach to working with athletes, and some of the tools that you have found working with your athletes most useful to them. Things that you tell them to do to help them with their mental game. I don't know whether it's breath work or self-talk, whatever approaches that you use. So yeah, like just kind of how you approach an athlete, and helping them with their mental development, and also some of the tools that you have found most useful with the athletes that you've worked with.
hmm so I'm currently working for a company called CEP Mindset, and as a company, our approach, we start with kind of a mental toughness, mental skills assessment. Uh, so we measure leadership, discipline. Um, oh gosh, this is bad. I should know this. Focus, composure, resilience, confidence, and your ability to stay centered. So like concentration, kind of blocking out the noise and the distractions.
Okay. That's a lot
So
to
from
remember.
that,
So we'll give you the benefit of the doubt.
I know I only kind of hesitated on the one. I'm proud of
Yeah.
myself for that. That's good. All right,
That's
I got to send this to my
that's
boss later.
impressive.
Like,
Yeah,
hey,
exactly.
look at what I know.
Exactly. Oh, you should
um,
know this. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I'll be like, that's good. You're doing your job.
Exactly.
Great. Thank you. That's encouraging. Yeah. So we have our athletes fill in this assessment, and then we just kind of walk through the results with them and figure out what our priorities would be. In my experience, confidence is typically a big one, and composure is another huge one. Being able to perform under pressure, and then resilience would probably be also in that top three. Just that ability to overcome adversity and bounce back from those mistakes and deal with it when a coach decides to rip you apart for something that wasn't even your fault, which is a huge one. Very frustrating, but it's okay. So yeah, from there, we just kind of work with the athletes one-on-one to work through those priorities and those skills. But I think my absolute favorite strategy that we use is called the alter ego. And it kind of stems from Todd Herman's book. I think it's called The Alter Ego. And essentially we just, talk to the athlete about describing their best self and their worst self. So it's kind of like their Superman versus their Clark Kent. I know there's an athlete who was like, as their worst self, they were like Dory from Finding Nemo, just kind of bumbling around, not doing so well, versus being a shark and being in that attack mode. So we kind of walk through the thoughts and the feelings and the actions and the arousal level that these athletes experience in as both their worst self and their best self. And by creating those distinctions and creating complete identities and kind of naming those two separate versions of yourself, it brings so much more self-awareness to it. And a lot of athletes don't realize that when they tense up, they're gripping their stick a little bit tighter, or they sit down on the bench and they're shaking their legs a little bit. Like, you don't really notice those little things that you do because they're just kind of automatic responses. So by developing that self-awareness and understanding those two versions of yourself, once it becomes game time and those not so great things happen, you're like, okay, I'm not being a great version of myself right now. I'm aware of that now. What are the things I have to strive to do? So we have a bunch of different strategies that we use to kind of like activate that best self when we aren't being that person, and to kind of bounce back from mistakes and prepare to show up as that person. A bunch of different things. But I think at the core of that, the alter ego is so important, just so you have an understanding of the person that you are trying to not be and the person that you're trying to kind of work away from, and also having that person you're striving to be more like, that best version of yourself. So the version of yourself who's really hard on yourself and overly critical and overthinking and underperforming, and taking out on teammates or refs or opponents, or talking back to a coach, or just completely shutting down and becoming really quiet, versus the best version of yourself who's just having a good time and focusing on the things that they can control and showing up to games happy, and leaving their frustrations at the rink after a game instead of taking it home. You find these versions of yourself, you find those little nuances, the things that tell you who you're showing up as, who you're leaving the rink as. And I found that that's one of the most helpful tools that I've used so far with athletes.
Just that self-reflection and that finding that alter ego and finding both the two parts of yourself. I like that a lot. And I think that these are things that aren't really talked about. I'm happy that you're bringing this up. There's a bit of a new topic. And I think they're very taboo to talk about. Like, no one's like, I'm a hockey player or I'm a football player. Like, what does this have to do with my performance? But if you reflect and look back and see like when you are at your best self and when you're not, I feel like you can tell what kind of mode that you're in. Like you are in that attack mode, or when you're not that great, you are in that Dory mode, like you talked about.
Yeah.
they're very underrated things that I think you're bringing up, and I'm happy that you are, because they're so unathletically related, but we are people first before we're an athlete. And I think if we can channel who we are as a person and individual, and then, hey, I got to bring this for this event, or I got to bring this for this scenario that I'm approaching, you are able to know yourself better, and you're able to self-reflect and realize, okay, I got to bring this here. And then when something, it goes back to when something doesn't, go right. Okay, go back to who I am, go back to, it's just one mistake, and flush it out. It's just all very interpersonal skills that you have with yourself that I think can really benefit. And like I mentioned, they're not talked about. I'm so happy that you are bringing it up, because it's very new, and I don't want a lot of people to be like, oh, what's this to do with it? But it does help.
Yeah, and I think a huge part of figuring out those identities is also understanding when they come out. Like you said, if you are your best self until your coach rips you a new one after you make a mistake, and then you become your worst self and you completely shut down. Like,
Mhm.
obviously that relates to performance. Like, when you think about it, if you figure out that every time your coach rips you apart, you start repeating those things that the coach says in your head over and over again, and you try to overcompensate, and you're overanalyzing, you're overthinking, and then you're playing horribly. If you know that's going to happen, there are things you can do proactively to, lessen the impact that the coach has on you, and to kind of filter through what your coach is saying, to pull out the pieces that are valuable knowledge that you can bring to improve your next shift, and the things that you just need to say, this is my way, this is the way that my coach is communicating. It is not a reflection of me as a person.
Mhm.
Like, there are things you can do proactively to prepare yourself for a situation when your coach yells at you, and then it may not shut you down as much. And there are strategies that you can do if it does shut you down to kind of get you back in the game. So yeah, maybe the alter ego doesn't seem like something that directly impacts your performance just at face value, but when you think about it for like literally half a second, it does. It
Mhm.
really does influence your performance, because you understand your performance. It's not just showing up at the rink, playing, and going home. There's so much more to hockey than that. There's so much more to sports than just showing up, playing, and leaving. Um, and I think the elite of the elite are well aware of that. I think there's a reason that McKinnon and McDavid and, guys at that caliber, like the Crosbys of the world, Ovechkin, those guys show up consistently.
Mhm.
Like, when they have a bad game, you don't really notice, because it's not actually a bad game. It's just like a couple of mistakes here and there, or opportunities that they may have scored, or opportunities that they may have capitalized on in their best games, but they're not liabilities. They don't shut down. They don't change the way they're playing. They show up and they bring it every game without hesitation. Like, McKinnon has now had, I think it was the first round, he said, we should be able to win a game when we score 6 goals. Like, yeah, probably, but you didn't. And then again, they score 6 goals and they lose. And I'm sure he's getting pretty frustrated by that, as anyone would be. Like, if my team scores 6 goals and we lose, I'm probably pretty frustrated. That
Mhm.
sucks. But I'm sure he understands that, that's just the way it is. What can he do? He
Mhm.
he's not going to go in net. They're not going to miraculously, just start shutting out some of these offensive powerhouse teams. Like, it is what it is. So he just has to keep doing his job, and he has to keep showing up, and he has to keep working hard and being a leader and doing everything that he can that's within his control,
Mhm.
despite all the frustrations that might be coming with every game, every practice, every off day, whatever it is. It's all about doing what you can do. And I feel like I kind of went on a tangent there and went very much off track, but
No,
bringing it
but
back in, we're
it,
back.
no, but it makes sense again. It's important that you're going in and giving context. So I appreciate it, and I know the listeners do too. But um, yeah, it makes sense. Just controlling what you can control, and like you talked about with the alter ego, you can be a shark up until your coach yells at you, then you're Dory, and then it's like, okay, we'll get back to the shark. That's what the greats do. That's what McKinnon does. You think he's not getting yelled at? I mean, maybe not on the bench, but I'm sure he's getting ripped in video sessions from time to time. And does he just immediately shut down? No, he just goes back to his process, back to what he can control, and back to his alter ego at the rink of being that shark. So I think
Mhm.
it's awesome what you're saying. It makes a ton of sense. So definitely appreciate it. And don't want to take up too much of your time. Just have one last question for you. Just a little way I like to end each episode. And we kind of already talked about it a little bit, but just, I guess, 3 pieces of advice that you would give a young athlete on their way up. And, they have big goals of making their professional league in whatever sport they're in. Or maybe it's something that you would have liked to have told your younger self. What are some things that you would have, I guess, words of advice you would give to a young athlete or your younger self, let's say?
Okay. Oh, so much.
Loaded question. I know I didn't actually
Yeah, that's
prepare
a
you for that
huge
one. I
one.
apologize for throwing that on you, but here we are.
That's all right. All right, let's see what I can do. I'll start with, your sport is something you do. It's not who you are. Huge one. Stand by that. Um, don't compare your day one to someone else's day 100. That one is something that I'm still kind of learning. So there are people in the field that I look up to and I'm like, God, I wish I was at that level. And it's like, they're also like 10, 15 years older than me. I could be there soon.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I just need to reel it back in and start appreciating where I am now and the context that I'm in, and, only being out of school for a year now, I'm doing perfectly fine. I'm doing fine. But when I compare myself to the people who are years older than me with completely different experiences and different pathways, like, it can be discouraging. But you cannot compare your day one to someone else's day 100. You're at different places. You just have to be understanding of that. What else? Be kind to yourself. And it's kind of expected, but we don't really, I think just generally people don't do that enough. I think we are hard on ourselves because we expect a lot of ourselves and we think we're supposed to be critical. And yes, of course, like, you want to be self-critical in a way that is helpful and aids your growth and development, but you also need to be your biggest fan. You need to cheer yourself on and support yourself and give yourself praise. Like, I think so many people are like, yeah, setting goals is great. You achieve your goal and then you set the next one, you'd achieve that, and like, you just keep going. And it's like, there needs to be a little pause in the middle. Like, yes, you finish something and you achieve it, you get there, and you're like, all right, what's next? Let's keep going, let's keep rolling. But there needs to be that moment where you're like, you kind of look back and you're like, look at how far I've come. Like, this is unreal. Look at me go. Okay, now we can go to the next one. But you have to have that moment of appreciation and kindness for yourself. And on the days where, you're not getting 1% better or whatever that cliche is, like, rest, sleep, do what you need to do, eat the unhealthy food, watch Netflix instead of reading a book. Like, who cares? This is your life. And like, if watching Netflix makes you happier than reading books, fine, do that. Like, there's so much going on in the world. There's so many pressures and expectations put on by other people that, like, you need to be good to yourself despite what other people might think. I think self-compassion and kindness towards oneself is really important and often overlooked. But I would definitely tell younger Sam to be a lot nicer to herself.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I couldn't agree more. I think those 3 things are awesome. I think a lot of athletes should listen to that message and really start to do these things. I definitely agree that it's great to be critical, but also look at where you're at and look how far you've come. Whoever you are listening, just take some time to give yourself a pat on the back, and then hit the ground rolling again and keep working. But those are 3 awesome things. And thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time, and all the things that you said are going to be super beneficial to all the athletes out there, people out there listening. I think this was a fantastic episode, and I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing this information and sharing your time with us. And if you can please give a shout out to your social media platform, whatever you have, and that way people can get in touch with you or follow you. You have a lot of great content on your Instagram. So if you can just give yourself a quick shout out and people can follow you there.
Yeah, for sure. So my Instagram is samlevins.mp, and my Twitter is, oh gosh, I should know this, Sam Levins 1T, because I used to think I could take one-timers, but jokes on me because I sucked at those.
Like the number one or
the number one.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I was convinced that I was Stamkos, Ovechkin, top of the circle. I was convinced I could do it. That was I made my Twitter in my phase of not understanding the kind of player I was. So that's that. But
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
Anyways,
a great tool to go back and reflect and see, hey, look how far I've come. Now I know, I recognize that's not me, and but it's always a
yeah.
gentle reminder.
Yeah. My
Um,
sister keeps telling me to change it, and I keep saying it's too late. It's staying forever. I'm stuck with
exactly.
this.
I love it.
Yeah. But thank you so much for having me today. It's been a really good conversation.